The halls of Forrester Creations had witnessed betrayals, broken marriages, secret romances, and family wars before, but nothing could prepare Will Spencer for the moment Dylan walked toward him with tears filling her eyes and a secret she could no longer keep. Will had already been carrying enough emotional weight. His relationship with Electra had become complicated. His family had strong opinions about every decision he made, and the growing tension between Dylan and the people closest to him had made it almost impossible to know whom he could trust. Yet when Dylan quietly closed the office door behind her, Will immediately sensed that this conversation was different. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't trying to flirt with him or convince him that they belonged together. Her hands were trembling, and she kept looking down at the small object she was holding inside her purse as though she wished it would disappear. "Dylan, what's going on?" Will asked. She tried to answer, but the words seemed trapped in her throat. Finally, after several painful seconds, she looked directly into his eyes and whispered, "Will, there's something I have to tell you." Will's expression tightened. Dylan reached into her purse and pulled out a pregnancy test. His eyes immediately dropped toward it, and suddenly the room felt impossibly quiet. Dylan swallowed hard and said the words that could change everything. "I'm pregnant, Will." For a moment, Will simply stared at her. He looked from Dylan's face to the test in her hand, and then back again. "Pregnant," he repeated, almost as though he had forgotten what the word meant. Dylan nodded slowly. She explained that she had taken more than one test because she couldn't believe the first result. She had spent hours trying to convince herself that there had been a mistake, but every result had told her the same thing. Will stepped backward, running a hand through his hair. His mind immediately returned to everything that had happened between them, the emotional confusion, the night Dylan had been at his home, the arguments with Electra, and all the choices he wished he could revisit. Dylan watched his reaction carefully. She wanted comfort, but she also seemed afraid of what he might say next. "Are you sure?" Will asked. Dylan's face fell. "Yes, Will. I'm sure I'm pregnant." Then she paused before adding the words she knew he was really asking about. "And I believe you're the father." That single sentence hit Will harder than the first revelation. He sat down slowly, struggling to understand how his life could change in less than a minute. Dylan moved closer and told him she hadn't come to trap him. She didn't expect an instant commitment, a wedding, or even an answer about what their future would look like. She only believed he deserved to know. But Will had barely begun processing her confession when the office door suddenly opened. Katie Logan stood in the doorway. Katie had come looking for her son after hearing that he was upset, but the scene in front of her immediately set off every maternal instinct she had. Dylan was crying. Will looked stunned. And sitting on the desk, between them, was the pregnancy test. Katie's eyes narrowed. "What is going on here?" she demanded. Neither answered quickly enough. Katie walked into the room and picked up the test. She looked at Dylan, then at Will. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is." Will stood. "Mom, please." Katie's voice became sharper. "Will, what happened?" Dylan tried to explain. "Katie, I was just telling Will. Asked my son." Will looked uncomfortable, but before he could answer, Dylan finally said it herself. "I'm pregnant." Katie froze. The anger didn't come immediately. First there was shock, then fear, and finally suspicion. Katie slowly placed the test back on the desk. "And you're saying this baby belongs to Will?" Dylan nodded. "Yes." Katie stared at her for several long seconds. Something about Dylan's certainty bothered her. Katie had spent weeks feeling that there was more to Dylan than anyone understood. From the moment she first looked at the young woman, something had stirred in Katie's memory. There had been questions about Dylan's past, unanswered details about her family, and moments when Katie felt as if Dylan was carefully choosing every word she said. Now Dylan was standing in front of her claiming to be pregnant with Will Spencer's child. Katie shook her head. "No." Dylan blinked. "What?" Katie stepped between Dylan and Will. "No. I'm not accepting this." "Mom," Will warned. Katie turned toward Dylan and exploded. "That baby isn't Will's." The accusation stunned both of them. Dylan's eyes widened. "How can you say that?" "Because there are too many things about you that don't add up," Katie replied. "Every time someone asks about your past, There's another explanation, another coincidence, another secret. And now suddenly you're pregnant and you want Will to believe he's the father? Dylan's shock turned into anger. I didn't want this to happen. Katie refused to back down. Then prove it. Will immediately stepped forward. Mom, stop.
No, Will.
Someone has to protect you. From what? A baby? From making a permanent decision based on something that hasn't been proven. Dylan's eyes filled with tears. She accused Katie of hating her from the beginning and wanting Electra back in Will's life so badly that she would never accept anyone else. Katie denied that this was about Electra. She admitted that she cared about Electra and had once hoped Will and Electra could repair their relationship, but this was bigger than romance. If Dylan was carrying Will's child, Katie would eventually have to accept that reality. But she was not going to let Will reorganize his entire future around a claim without knowing the truth. Will looked caught between them. He didn't want to humiliate Dylan, but Katie's words had awakened questions he had been afraid to ask. Dylan noticed the change in his face. You believe her, she whispered. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Dylan grabbed her purse and headed toward the door, but Katie stopped her with one final question. Who else could be the father? Dylan slowly turned around. No one. Katie studied her face. You're sure? Yes. Then you shouldn't be afraid of the truth. Dylan left the office in tears. Unfortunately, the confrontation had not gone unnoticed. Electra had been approaching the office when she heard raised voices. She hadn't heard every word, but she heard enough. Pregnant. Will. Father. Baby. She stopped in the hallway as if the floor had disappeared beneath her. For weeks, Electra had tried to convince herself that whatever had happened between Will and Dylan belonged to the past. She had been angry with Will, disappointed in him, and equally angry with herself for allowing other people to influence her choices. Deep down, she still loved him. That was what made Dylan's announcement so devastating. Electra quietly backed away before Will could see her. Inside the office, Will confronted Katie. You had no right to do that. Katie's anger softened when she saw how shaken her son was. Maybe not, but I have every right to ask questions when someone walks into your life and tells you something that could change everything. What if she's telling the truth? Then we deal with the truth. And if she isn't? Katie paused. Then you'll be grateful we asked. Will turned toward the window. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Katie approached him and placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't promise anyone anything today. Don't make a decision because you're scared or guilty. Find out what's true first. Will knew his mother was right about one thing. He needed certainty. Across the building, Dylan rushed into an empty design room and shut the door. She pressed both hands against the table, trying to control her breathing. Katie's accusation had cut deeply because Dylan had expected questions, but not an outright declaration that Will wasn't the father. She took out her phone and stared at a contact she hadn't called in weeks. Her finger hovered over the screen. Then she put the phone away. That hesitation would have meant nothing to anyone else, but unfortunately for Dylan, Wyatt Spencer had seen her disappear into the room. Wyatt had already been suspicious of Dylan. Something about her background had bothered him, and his concern had grown after realizing that there might be connections between Dylan's family and people from the Spencers' past. He didn't know exactly what she was hiding, but he believed Will was moving too quickly into a situation he didn't understand. When Wyatt later learned about the pregnancy, his concern turned serious. You're telling me Dylan says she's carrying Will's baby? Wyatt asked Katie. That's what she says. And Will believes her? He doesn't know what to believe. Wyatt shook his head. Then he needs facts. Katie looked at him carefully. You've been warning him about Dylan. What do you know? Wyatt hesitated. That hesitation immediately caught Katie's attention. Wyatt, there are things about Dylan's family that don't sit right with me. What things? I'm still trying to put it together. Katie stepped closer. If you know something that could affect my son, now is not the time to protect anyone. Wyatt promised he would tell her as soon as he was certain. Katie didn't like the answer, but she could see from his expression that he was genuinely worried. Meanwhile, Will went searching for Dylan. He found her outside Forrester Creations, preparing to leave. Dylan, wait. She turned, wiping away tears. What do you want, Will? I want to talk without my mother standing between us. There's nothing left to talk about. She thinks I'm lying. I don't. Dylan looked hopeful for a moment. Will continued, but I do need to know the truth. Her hope disappeared. So you do doubt me? I'm trying not to. Dylan shook her head. Do you understand how humiliating this is? I came to you terrified. I told you something that scared me more than anything, and within minutes your mother was accusing me of trying to trap you. I'm sorry about how she handled it, but you still want proof. Will couldn't deny it. Eventually, yes. Dylan looked away.
Fine.
You'll get your proof. She walked off, leaving Will with more questions than answers. Electra had seen enough from a distance to understand that Will had gone after Dylan. Her heart sank. She tried to return to work, but every sketch on the table blurred in front of her. RJ noticed immediately. Electra? I'm fine. You don't look fine. She gathered her papers. I said I'm fine. RJ didn't push it first, but when he mentioned Will's name, Electra's composure broke. Dylan is pregnant. RJ stared at her.
What?
And she says Will is the father. For once, RJ had no clever answer. Whatever rivalry existed between him and Will suddenly seemed insignificant. He could see that Electra was devastated. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Electra shook her head. I don't even know why it hurts this much. Will and I aren't together. That doesn't mean you stopped loving him. Electra looked at RJ, and the silence answered for her. News traveled quickly through the families. Bill Spencer was furious when he heard what had happened, not because Dylan was pregnant, but because Will had been placed in the center of another emotional crisis without clear answers. Bill found Will and immediately asked whether Dylan had seen a doctor. Dad, can everybody stop interrogating me? I'm not interrogating you. I'm asking whether there's medical confirmation. She says she took several tests. That confirms pregnancy. It doesn't confirm paternity. Will stared at him. You sound exactly like Mom. On this, your mother is right. Will groaned. Bill lowered his voice. Listen to me. If that child is yours, you step up. You love that child. You protect that child. And you make sure the baby never feels like a mistake. But being responsible doesn't mean being foolish. Will finally looked at his father. Bill continued, you can care about Dylan and still ask questions. That advice stayed with Will. Later that evening, Katie found Electra alone. The moment Electra saw her, she tried to hide how upset she was. You heard, Katie said. Electra nodded. I'm sorry.
Why?
It's not your fault. Katie hesitated. I told Dylan I don't believe the baby is Will's. Electra looked stunned. Katie, I know how it sounds. It sounds like you accused a pregnant woman of lying. I accused someone with an unclear past of making a claim that needs to be verified. Electra shook her head. You can't do this because you want Will and me back together. Katie's expression softened. That isn't why. Isn't it?
No.
And you need to hear something too. If that baby is Will's, you cannot make Will feel guilty for being there for his child. Electra's eyes became wet. Katie continued gently. Whatever happens between you and Will, an innocent baby would come first. Electra nodded. I know. That was exactly what frightened her. If Dylan was carrying Will's baby, then Dylan would always be part of his life. Electra could forgive a mistake. She could survive heartbreak. But could she build a future with Will while watching him create a permanent family bond with someone else? The following morning brought another surprise. Dylan arrived at Forster Creations looking pale and exhausted. She had barely made it through the lobby when she became dizzy. Will happened to be nearby and rushed to steady her. Dylan, I'm okay. No, you're not. Katie entered just as Will helped Dylan into a chair. For one frightening second, Katie's suspicion disappeared and was replaced by concern. Whatever she thought about the baby's paternity, Dylan's health mattered. You need a doctor, Katie said. Dylan looked surprised by her softer tone. Will insisted on taking Dylan to the hospital. Katie joined them, despite Dylan clearly wishing she wouldn't. At the hospital, A doctor confirmed that Dylan was indeed pregnant. Will sat beside her, staring at the medical paperwork. There was no longer any question about the pregnancy itself. Katie remained quiet. Dylan finally looked at her. Do you believe me now? I believe you're pregnant. And you still don't believe Will is the father. Katie chose her words carefully. I believe that question deserves certainty. Dylan laughed bitterly. Nothing will ever be enough for you. Will stepped in before the argument could begin again. Stop. Both of you. Katie left the room to give them privacy. Will sat beside Dylan. How are you feeling? Scared. Me too. Dylan looked at him. I know this isn't how you imagined your life. I haven't imagined much past next week lately. She almost smiled. Will reached for her hand. If this baby is mine, I'm going to be there. Dylan's eyes filled with tears. But, he continued, I need honesty from you. Complete honesty. Her expression changed. Is there anything about your past that could come back and change this?
No.
Dylan. There isn't. Will searched her eyes. He wanted to believe her. Outside the room, Katie received a call from Wyatt. Katie, I found something. Her heart began racing. What? I need to show you in person. Wyatt, just tell me.
No.
Not over the phone. Katie looked through the hospital window at Dylan and Will. Does it involve the baby? Wyatt paused. It might. Katie ended the call and immediately left to meet him. Wyatt arrived carrying an old photograph and several pages of information. He placed them on the table in front of Katie. The photograph showed a younger woman Katie recognized from years ago. Beside her stood another person whose face made Katie's expression change completely. I knew it, Katie whispered. Wyatt nodded. Dylan hasn't told Will everything. Katie picked up the photograph. Does Will know about this?
No.
And Dylan, she has too. Katie's anger returned, but Wyatt stopped her before she could rush back to the hospital. We still don't know exactly what it means. It means she lied. It means she withheld something. That's not necessarily the same thing. Katie looked at him sharply. When my son is being told he's about to become a father, I don't have patience for technicalities. Wyatt agreed they needed answers, but he warned Katie that confronting Dylan without the full story could make everything worse. Back at the hospital, Dylan finally relaxed enough to talk to Will about the future. She admitted that she had imagined him being angry, but his willingness to stay beside her gave her hope. Then Will's phone rang. It was Electra. He stared at the screen. Dylan noticed. You can answer. I'll call her later. Dylan looked down. You still love her. Will didn't respond. You don't have to lie to me, Dylan continued. I know you do. This isn't about Electra. It's always about Electra. Will stood. I'm not discussing my relationship with Electra while you're sitting in a hospital bed. That's exactly why we need to discuss it. Because if this baby is yours, everything changes. Will turned toward her. Dylan's voice became emotional. I don't expect you to fall in love with me, because I'm pregnant. But I can't spend the next 9 months wondering whether you secretly wish Electra were the one sitting here. Will was speechless. That was when Electra appeared in the doorway. She had come because she couldn't ignore her concern. No matter how hurt she was, she wanted to know Dylan and the baby were okay. Unfortunately, she had arrived in time to hear Dylan's final sentence. Dylan looked at Electra. Will looked trapped. Electra forced herself to remain composed. I just wanted to make sure everything